Scott Wells. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. I'm glad to be here.
Excellent. I'm glad to have you on. We're kind of talking beforehand about how much we were anticipating this, both of us, and so definitely interested in jumping in. Before we get going, let me give the audience a brief introduction here for you, for they get a feel of who you are before we start the conversation. You are a best-selling thriller and horror author, acclaimed for emotionally gripping, suspense-driven stories that blend real-life inspiration with chilling fiction, blurring the line between truth and the terrifying unknown to challenge readers' perceptions of reality. Storyteller on deeper truths and human connection, you draw from real-life events and personal experiences to craft tales about deception, survival, courage in adversity, and seeing beyond surface appearances, inviting audiences to question assumptions, build empathy, embrace transformation. You're an award-winning screenwriter, breakthrough, where you first gained attention with your screenplay Phantom Ranch, semifinalist at the Atlanta Screenplay Awards, now evolving into a novel, showing your roots in visual storytelling and high-stakes narrative. And you're also an outdoor adventurer and mental clarity advocate. With over 40 years exploring nature in Idaho's wilds, you run the YouTube channel Explore Life Outside, sharing adventures that promote mental clarity, introspection, and the healing power of the outdoors, which is one thing that I don't think is very common in today's society, is the realization of how much being outside will improve your health, your mental health, your groundedness, relieve anxiety, all those kinds of things.
Couldn't agree more. It's I grew up in Idaho and spent probably 3 out of the 4 weekends in the mountains, and so from an early age, I learned how beneficial it is, and exactly like you said. I mean, there's you know some people think, oh, it's just a way to disconnect, and it is, but it's so much more than that. Like you said, your soul. I mean,
Yeah.
it resets your soul. It can. There's just so many other benefits, and that's why I started Explore Life Outside is to introduce those different benefits to people and hopefully encourage them to get outside and try something new that they haven't done before.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That kind of already jump started my initial first question of where were you born and what was life like as a kid? Were you born in Idaho?
I was. It was a small farming town in southern Idaho, and it was one of those towns where uh, you knew everyone.
Yeah.
It was, nobody was a stranger. It seemed like, and I grew up, that area, and I grew up in I was raised Mormon,
Okay.
and that affected not just my uh, beliefs, but it helped to structure who I was, and not the way that, not the person that I thought it was going, not the effect that I thought it was going to have. It's been transformative for me in a variety of different ways. But
Right.
that's the environment that I grew up in, and I I have 3 other siblings, a sister and 2 brothers, and we're pretty spread out. But as far as age, my one brother just 2 years older than I am, and the others are my other brother and sister are quite a bit older. But um, you know, they're so sometimes even they read my first book, and uh, they're they'll read this next one, Phantom Ranch, and I was talking to my sister the other day, and she's like, "It still amazes me how different you are from when I was I was growing up, I was a kid. So I'm like, well, that's what experiences will do. you
Right.
know.
For sure. Um, in your younger years, what type of work did your mom and dad do?
So my dad was in the tire industry
Okay.
for years,
All
and
right.
he was also a volunteer fireman for 36 years.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, it was in that small town. It was he was a volunteer fireman, which was a lot of fun because I got to see a lot of I have different experiences, and I got to see a lot of uh, how brotherhood
Yeah.
can really affect can benefit your life. You don't have to be family, but it's just like family. And I think
And
that's really helped it. And my mom, so my dad was in tires and he was a volunteer fireman. And then we ended up moving to a small, I refer to it as a mountain town in northern Idaho. It's a little place called Weiser. It's right at the gateway to Hell's Canyon, and it's a cool little town. And when we moved there when I was 10, we ended up moving back to Burley, but we moved there, and my dad he was a volunteer or auxiliary policeman. So I got to
okay.
see that side of it as well. And then my mom, she was a stay-at-home mom for quite a while. And then when I got in school, I was the youngest. When I got in school, she started working at um, uh, she worked at a flower store for a while, and then she worked at a clothing store, which was fun because they needed models for their summer wear. And my mom was
Right.
like, "I don't someone," and I'm like, "Wow, that's the first time that my first experience with the camera."
Right. Nice. How about grandparents? Did you have grandparents in your life early on as well?
Yeah, I did. So on my mom's side, uh, I didn't have the opportunity to meet my grandpa, my
Okay.
mom's dad. However, I have been told my entire life that, from my aunts and uncles that knew him, obviously that were his dad, that he and I would have gotten along very, very well. I've been told that I reminded them of him, and he was an amazing man. Unfortunately, he was hit by a drunk driver and died before I was born. But I was actually my middle name. I was named after him. So and then my grandma, she helped raise me for a while. She was stern, stern, but she was very loving. And then on my dad's side, they're not Mormon,
Okay.
and and uh, they were. I didn't. It was my step grandpa,
Yeah.
and
Okay.
so we used to go out to my grandma and step grandpa's house every Sunday. They lived in town, just about 10 miles away. So we used to go out there and visit them, and I have a lot of great memories with them. As soon as we would get there, my grandpa, he always, he would say, "Oh, there's my little papoose." And then he would take me out and we would pick fresh rhubarb.
Yeah.
And so, I have a lot of great memories. And then I had a really close, I consider a very special relationship with my mom's uncle, with my grandma's brother. Uh, in fourth grade, my school was across, kind of cat a corner from the house, and my mom would be at work, and I would go to school and pretend like everything's fine, and then I would leave, jump the fence during recess, and go home, and I would go down to the senior citizen center and spend the day with. I called him my uncle Ray. It was
Yeah.
my mom's uncle, and we would go down there. We would play cards, and he would tell his buddies there. I don't know how many times, and I do not know why I did this or why I started doing this, but there were probably more times than not that I would go home and dress up like a clown and then walk down the street. A fourth grader dress up like a clown, walking down the street. It was about maybe 4 blocks away, and go. I guess I just wanted to make him laugh and make his friends laugh. But it was, I that relationship, uh, he was probably in his 80s,
Yeah.
and it was just a pure relationship. And I remember the night he passed away, I was playing kick the can with some friends out in the front, and my mom come out and told me that he'd passed away. And I remember it was one of those things you never forget where you were,
Well,
and that tells me how special, how much that relationship meant to me. And I remember I collapsed and I cried, and I remember thinking I never told him one more time how much I loved him, how much I cared about him. And so ever since that day, I don't leave the house. I don't do anything, or I don't let people, my family or now my husband, leave without telling them I love them, because, you just never know when something can happen. And I'll never forget that experience, or that feeling of wondering if he knew that I loved him and how much I cared about him. So I'm like, I'm never going to make that mistake again. So that was that had a real pivotal effect on my life for the rest of my life.
yeah, I imagine so. I remember that with my grandfather, um, and my mom's dad. My father's dad, he passed away 6 months after I was born, so I didn't really know him ever. My mom's grandfather, really close with him and grandma, because they had a farm. Both sides of the family are from East Tennessee.
Oh,
So
okay.
my mom's father had a farm, and he was also a Southern Baptist minister. So during the week, he worked the farm, did all the stuff on the farm, and then the weekends he went, pastored his church, all that kind of stuff. And it, every time he was up and walking out the door, if I was sleeping anywhere close to it where I could hear it, I would immediately jump out of bed, grab something, stick it in my mouth, and on his heels right after him. So I totally understand that moment in time when you hear that first um, expression of somebody passed away that you were really close to. I was 11,
Wow.
passed away.
Why do for in your experience, why do you think you and your grandfather had such a tight relationship?
From me, and I don't know how much you believe in the afterlife or previous lives or any of that type of stuff, but I have a sense now, as I'm older and I have a more expanded thought of the world and various things of spirituality and consciousness and all that type of stuff. I feel that it was a connection that had been there many, many times over. So it was just so in sync that it was that natural scenario that would just take place. Also, too, I believe he had a true spiritual connection to where he was realizing things about me that early on as a child that I didn't realize about myself. And so him, being interested and showing interest of keeping me as close as I could be, at that age and during that time when we were having vacation or holidays or any of that stuff, we were there because we live in Michigan. We would travel there every time there was an opportunity to, because that's where all the family was. So, um, an interesting component about that is when I really started opening up uh, my thought process is about spirituality rather than the religion that I was raised in. Interestingly enough, that I got a message through a friend who was a psychic, and it was him coming through with that message. So if you can, I'm sure you can understand instantly the irony of
Yeah,
him,
absolutely.
him as a Southern Baptist minister coming through a psychic to give me a message to let me know he's on the other side. He can still see me. He's still with me. But also, too, all of the stuff that I knew and thought that I knew early on that was not really encouraged to express uh, sensory perception things that I could see that others weren't able to see. Um, he let me know that that stuff was all real and that it was okay to be who I am and that I could start living a life that had a more expanded thought, a more expanded relationship with spirit, spirituality, all of those types of things. So that I think that's why, for me, anyways, it was so powerful and so ingrained that that connection was there, and it it was the first hurt of someone's death that I experienced, which
Yeah,
I'm getting from your story is the same for you.
absolutely. And you know, I've thought my entire life, I'm like, I've just tried to figure out why, even though we were a family with two people that had such a huge age difference, would consider each other's best friend.
Yeah,
And you know, so whenever I hear stories like yours that relate, you know, that are so similar to mine, you know, I always find it interesting what their what their thought is, you know, and hopefully it'll help me understand. You know, I I don't think I'll ever I don't really need to understand. I just know how
yeah,
important it was, and I truly wish that more people had experiences like what you had, as far as that. You know, my dad went through a huge transformation while he was still alive, where your grandfather, he went through a transformation that continued on after he passed. I mean, you know,
yeah,
being a Baptist minister, and then, you know, coming through a psychic and sharing a message with you. I mean, that just shows that it doesn't end at death, and that you can
right.
that spirits can still. And from my own experience, you know, that's why I wrote the first book. Is it you know, it sticks with you, and it, you know, just because you die doesn't mean that you're going to stop learning and stop, you know, evolving, I guess you can say.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And even from that perspective too, my understanding, if we're going to look at a scenario of what maybe the Buddhist philosophy is about, you know, they call it reincarnation. I just call it incarnation, um, because I don't think you always come back looking exactly as we do right now, talking to each other. I think it's just a process of the soul, because that is the eternal component within us, the soul. The soul cycles around time and time again to experience growth, experience um, trials and errors so it can learn and move up in the levels of the afterlife. And I feel that those types of connections are because in one way or another, they were the same in previous carnations, whether it was you were best friends in that incarnation, or you were uncle and nephew, or it was reversed and you were the uncle and that was the nephew before.
Yeah.
You know, those types of scenarios where you're both getting a different perspective this new time around, so that it helps you understand that much more and understand your existence better. So I think that's how it plays out.
I, I as soon as you said, that the soul basically the soul stays the same. It's just the shell that changes. And
Yeah.
I've always believed that. This experience that prompted the first book marked by the Ouija. I happened when I was 16, and that
Okay.
was my first experience with. I didn't really understand at the time, but that was my first experience understanding and believing that uh, someone on the other side or a spirit on the other side can actually still have feelings and still care and still
Yeah.
um, have an interest in because most of what you hear is, oh, they just want to scare you, you know.
Right.
And yeah, there are some malevolent ones, but um, I've talked to I've talked to a lot of paranormal investigators and a few mediums and things, and there's one paranormal investigator that I've become quite pretty good friends with, and she told me once, but I actually interviewed her for a documentary that we're actually doing that has spawned
Okay.
because of this first book, and she told me in the interview, she said that most people, in her experience, most people that have paranormal experiences or experiences with something that they don't understand, they automatically think that that spirit is aggressive or and coming after them when it
Yeah.
might be that they just wanted help. They
Right.
just needed help. And that was my experience. So as soon as she said that, I'm like, oh, that makes complete sense to me. And then what you're saying now, I mean, that just reinforces that. So
Yeah,
um
for sure. For sure. Can we go there, Scott? Can we go to that point in time? You said when you were 16, you had this first experience. Let's talk about that.
yeah, so I just wanted like that space in between because there were some areas that kind of led up to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll share that real quick. So growing up Mormon, I had a lot of internalized homophobia,
Okay.
and so I I didn't realize at the time, but when I look back, I filled myself with distractions because I knew that I was different, but I didn't understand why. And it wasn't so much my parents, but it was the religion that, and I'm sure
Oh
with
yeah.
yeah, you understand that. So I grew up just filling my life with distractions and hoping that it would go away. I ended up going on a Mormon mission later on, and that's why I was in Detroit. And
Okay.
we'll get to that. But at 16, when I was filling my life with these distractions, I've my parents taught me to love nature. They taught me that was if I could say that there's say two things that they taught me that will stick with me the rest of my life is they taught me to respect and love nature and the benefits of nature that we were talking about earlier, and the other was the optimism and the positivity that my mom had, and she got it from her dad, from my grandpa that I didn't meet, and that was another reason why I really really wanted, I wish I could have met him. But in that experience when I was 16, I was just trying to just at the time I thought just take away the boredom from living in a small town.
Yeah.
So I ended up finding a Ouija board at this local variety store, which it was bizarre because it's a small town and not everyone, but I would say probably 85% Mormon.
Right.
Not a place that you would imagine a Ouija board to be on sale. And certainly not in the game aisle where kids can go there.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, I found it, I bought it, and it was also at this time I was working at Pizza Hut. I was a server at Pizza Hut, and like most teenagers, I thought that I knew more than my parents,
Right.
And, so I got to be friends with my boss at Pizza Hut, and he was, probably 4 or 5 years older. And he had a house about 3 blocks from my parents' house. And so when I thought that I knew more than my parents, I'm like, well, I'm moving out and I'm moving in, with my boss. And my dad, he was like, well, you know what? Go. Don't let the door hit you where the good Lord splits it. And so when I had this experience, I was living, no, I wasn't at home. I was living, and it wasn't really on my own. I was living with my boss, and I was still going to school. So, uh, I was working one night, and I had two friends that were waiting for me at home because that house was known to be the party house. My boss was kind of a partier, and
Gotcha.
it was nothing very common to wake up in the middle of the night and go out to get something to drink and find strangers in the fridge, digging around in the fridge looking for beer. It
Yeah.
was known as the party house. And so they were
Okay.
waiting for me when I got home, or for me to get home. And I ended up pulling a double shift. That it was a Sunday, pulling that double shift. And then I got a call, and um, I didn't really understand. They told me, I noticed immediately that they were uh, freaked out, would be
Okay.
to say the least.
Yeah.
I don't even think that even is correctly described it, but they told me that they were bored, and they went in my room and found the Ouija board that I hadn't played yet, and started playing with it. And their experience was so traumatic that they ended up burning the board in a garbage can,
Oh,
uh,
wow.
in the backyard, right outside the window, or right outside the back door, right on the other side of the wall from my
Yeah.
bedroom. And I remember I was ticked off. I was pissed. I'm like, first off, you're snooping around my room.
Yep.
Second, you played a game before I even had a chance to play it. That's what I think pissed me off the most, was that they
Yeah.
did that. And so I got home that night, and when I walked up, we parked in the back, and when I walked up to the back door, I could smell the lighter fluid. The house was white, and the garbage can was this old beat up metal garbage can, and it was right up right up next to the back door.
Right.
And I could see the smoke marks that went up from the garbage can up to the white house, up to
Oh,
the
wow.
eaves of the house. And I, I still get goosebumps thinking about it. And when I got to the garbage can, I looked in, I saw the ash. I saw the ashes.
Mm.
And it was probably about 12:30 in the morning, because I worked till midnight and closed the restaurant. Then it was Sunday night. I had to go to school the next morning. So,
Right.
I'm like, well, there's nothing I can do now. So I went in and went to bed. The next morning, at 7:30, I left to go to school. And when I walked outside, it didn't smell like lighter fluid. There was no ash marks on the house. There was no ash in the garbage can. It was like
Oh,
there was no fire at all. No hint of a fire. But what freaked me out the most, or what intrigued me at that time, what intrigued me the most, was there was a brand new Ouija board in its box sitting on top of the garbage can. And what I thought was odd, immediately thought was odd, is this is an old metal garbage can. And
yeah.
I didn't get home until 12:30. It's 7 hours late, 7:30, I'm leaving. If my friends would have come back, if they were playing a joke on me, which I thought that's what it was, they would have had to come back and take the garbage can away, clean it out, and make sure there was no smell. You know how the smell of lighter fluid lingers.
Yep.
And they would have had to clean off, the house to where it didn't look like there were, nothing, all on the other side of the wall from where my bedroom was. So I would have
Right.
heard them. And I didn't hear a thing. So I got to school that day, and I thought, yeah, they're playing a joke on me. I just threw up my bedroom and left. And when I saw them in the hall that morning, as I was walking up to them, they turned around and looked at me, and their eyes were just huge, and they walked away from me. And to this day, they've not speak to me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I mean, I stopped trying to connect with them about probably about 25 years ago. But I was that interaction in the hallway was so surprising and dramatic. I had two other friends that lived two doors down from me, and they were fraternal twins, and they were talking at their lockers and saw that interaction. I'm like, what was that about? So I was telling them, like, no, it was a really good joke. And I said, but, whatever, I never thought that it was
Yeah.
real. I thought it was a joke. And so I'm like, well, come over on the following Sunday. I told the two brothers, my friends, come over and we'll play with it. And so the following Sunday, I was off work, and I remember it was probably around 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and we pulled the board out, and it was the three of us, and I was the scribe. I wrote down everything, and as soon as we started playing it, the planchette started moving, and um, which I don't know if you've ever played with one, but I think anyone the first time you always accuse like the other person, oh, you're pushing it, oh, you're pushing it. No, I'm not.
Right, right.
So we went through that, but these two brothers, they were fraternal twins, and I had never seen them argue or
Okay.
disagree with each other. And, but that was the first time they're like, oh, you're pushing. No, I didn't. And I'm like, oh, well, I believe you, like, so I believed him. But the, the spirit we were talking to, the person we were talking to, he said his name was Peter. He said that he had died in a car accident. And then he said it wasn't an accident. He didn't elaborate. We didn't expand on that because of what came after that. But I thought it was, when I look back, when I was writing the book, I was kind of going through everything, and I realized with my coming out, with my growing up Mormon and being gay and trying to hide it and distract it and hating myself for who I was,
Yeah.
that uh, I learned that my trust issues, my self-confidence, my self-worth, So
Yeah.
when this experience happened, we were playing with it, and this kid, Peter, said that his sister had been kidnapped, and she was bound and gagged in and was being held in a house in town, a boarded up house, and the kidnapper was going to kill her and then burn the house down. And he
Mm.
wanted her help. And I'm like, I don't believe that. I know every house in town, and there is not a boarded up house in town. And it gave us an address, a specific address.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I'm like, I don't know where that is. It's not a big town. So we jumped in my car and we drove over, and I'll be damned, there was a boarded up house that I never remembered seeing before. So we went and, it was daylight. We went and tried to pull the boards off and peek in and yell. He said her name was Chastity. So we're yelling out Chastity's name, and we didn't hear anything. We didn't see anything. So we went back. And
Mm.
as soon as we got back to the board, it said, she's there, go back. I mean, we hadn't even asked a question. It just immediately started, she's there, go back. So, so this lasted from about 5 o'clock. I figure it was about 5 o'clock on Sunday, all throughout the night. We went back and forth several times. One time we were there, I remember we had flashlights, and I had told one friend, to one of the brothers, I'm like, you look specifically for any light, listen for any movement inside the house. Told my other friend, you keep an eye out. It was on a corner. You stand on the corner and make sure that, there's no cars coming. and I'm going to look for footprints and tracks and see if there's any indication that uh, someone had entered or exited the house recently. And while we were there, I don't know what happened. Uh, to my friend, we're supposed to watch for cars, but I was closest to the road, and he was a big guy. He was a football player. He was very gentle,
Okay.
but he was a big. I mean, he towered over me, and all of a sudden he just disappeared. And I saw these headlights of a car coming, station wagon, and I could see it was driving up. So that the house was on a on a corner like this, and
Yeah.
it was right here, and the car was coming up here, and the closer it got to the house, it slowed down, and so I'm like, hide,
Right.
So we ducked behind different things, and I I assumed that it was a neighbor that heard something or saw, some kids, and
Right.
thought, oh, this is middle of the night, so I thought, they're coming over to make sure we're not vandalizing the house or something. And uh, as the car got closer, it actually stopped right next to the house. I'll never forget it. It stopped right next to the house, and it was close enough where I could see the silhouette of the driver. I could see that uh, it was a man.
Okay.
He was smoking. My dad smoked, and I could see the
Yeah.
red and the tip of the cigarette move around.
Yeah.
I could see that he was looking for us. I mean, he had actually stopped before the stop sign, and I could see him, like, his body moving,
Right.
and I I all of a sudden I thought, what if it's the killer? What if this is true? What if he's looking for us? And so he eventually took off. And then when he got he turned left at the stop sign of the three-way. And when he got far enough away, we took off. Well, this lasted all night. This experience lasted all night long. Uh, when we realized it, I remember it was 8 o'clock. It was after 8 o'clock. Monday morning, we're like, obviously we're skipping school. So we're like, well, let's go to the sheriff. And I'm like, well, before we go to the sheriff, because let's try and debunk it as much as we can.
Yeah.
So we went to the local newspaper. They had a room, a very small room with microfiche in there. So we told them that we
Okay.
were the three of us were doing a school project, and we spent 2 hours in the microfiche room looking for any obituary for at least 2 years before of a 16-year-old named Peter who died in a car accident, and we couldn't find
Okay.
anything, nothing. Um, the At that point, we just kind of relaxed, except for one of us, the one that was my big football player friend, the one that was supposed to be watching with the cars that just disappeared.
Yeah.
Um, the last time that we were playing with the board before we went to the newspaper office, uh, the board said, if you don't help my sister, you will die the same way that I died.
Oh,
And
geez.
it actually used his name. And uh, so when we were at the newspaper office, or newspaper, the microfiche room, uh, and we couldn't find any obituary for Peter, we're like, whew, it's not real, it's fake. I don't know what's going on. It's just a joke. It's not real. And he was really quiet. And when the two others of us were just like, whew, yeah, what a relief, what an experience, but we're relief. And then he said, well, we didn't ask him if he died here, because if he died in another town, his obituary wouldn't be in the
Right.
paper.
Yeah.
So we're like, ugh. So of course the tension just ratcheted back up. And we're like, well, let's go to the sheriff. So we went to the sheriff, and the sheriff lived about a block and a half from my parents. He knew my
Who
mom
you
and
were.
dad. Yeah,
Yeah.
he knew me. And we walked in, and he's like, Scott Wales, like, I know your dad's going to beat your ass if he knows that you're in my office and you're skipping school. He said, so if you don't leave and go to school now, then I'm going to take you to school in my cruiser, and I'm going to call you down on the way, and he's going to beat your ass, which he definitely would have. So I, we took off and forgot about it. What I thought was interesting, though, is, how do you go? And I've thought about this for years after. How do you go into someone and tell someone, hey, tell a sheriff in a small town, we think that there's a kidnapped girl. We think the kidnapper's going to kill her. And we know this, or we believe this because her dead brother told us.
Right.
No one's going to believe you, especially when you're 16.
Yeah.
But his reaction was different. He when we first said it, he said, how do you know this? We said, well, her brother told us. Well, where's her brother?
Yeah.
And one of my friends was like, well, he's dead. He's like, okay. He's like, I'll play along. He's like, what's his name? And I said, he said his name was Peter, and he died in a car accident. And immediately the sheriff's disposition changed.
Okay.
He was suddenly a lot more interested in the story.
Yeah.
And it was undeniable how much of a change that was. And it just never sat well with me, but I didn't understand why. And so, we left, and we graduated high school, and, forgot about it. And then about 10 years later, I was back home visiting my parents, and my mom was one of those people that saved everything. So I started writing stories when I was in second grade, and my mom saved all of those. Matter of fact, they're hilarious. I actually put them on my website. So everyone can read them, or people who visit the Reddit, and they're hilarious. And I'm like, I when I was putting them on the website, I was reading them again. And I'm like, oh my gosh, if someone didn't know that I was an 8-year-old Mormon kid, they would have swore that I was on acid. I mean, the stories are hilarious, but she saved everything, and all my awards and everything, and she had them in all the stories I'd written and all the letters and cards I'd made in this drawer. And I was going through that drawer, kind of going down memory lane, and I got to the bottom of it, and I could see that there was some paper sticking out. It was under the drawer, like somebody had pulled the drawer out, put it in there, and put the drawer back in. And over time, it kind of worked its way out. So I like, what the hell is that? So I pulled it out, and it was the stack of notes from that night when I wrote everything down.
Oh, wow.
And because I wrote everything, dates, or times, everything. And, I it brought it all back. I remember, I still get goosebumps, because it still takes me back there. But I was thinking, oh, my friends, I heard my friends are back in town, and I was leaving the next day. So, and this was I was back 10 years, but I went over there. I was leaving the next day. So I went over there, and one of the brothers answered, and we stood on the doorstep and talked for a little bit. And I said, oh, I'm leaving tomorrow. I'd love to see my other friend, his brother. And he said, oh, this is the football player. And he's like, you didn't hear. I said, no, I didn't hear what. And he said, well, he died in a car accident.
Oh, geez.
And it gets creepier. I said, because I just read those notes an hour before, and I said, oh, when? And he said, oh, it's a day I will never forget. And he told me the date. It was exactly 2 years to the date that threat came through.
Oh, man.
And I said, do you remember that night? And he stopped me. I saw it registered. His jaw dropped, and he said, and you know what? that house burned down too.
Oh man.
Yeah. And I, again, I didn't believe it at the time, leading up to that. At that point, I believed it.
Yeah.
But then I started, I mean, that experience kind of threw me into this part of this period of my life where um, I didn't trust myself. I didn't, I just, I was lost, you
Yeah.
know. I lost my identity, and uh, for quite a few years, and I tried to figure it out. But um, when I was writing the book years later, I was going through everything, and I remembered uh, the reaction of the sheriff. And
Right.
the more I thought about it, I am I don't want to accuse anybody of anything because I don't have proof.
Right.
But I personally, my own personal opinion, I believe the sheriff had something to do with it.
Mm,
And the reason I believe that is because of not only his reaction. Like I said, as soon as we mentioned Peter's name, his countenance changed. And
right.
then I thought, oh, he was the first person on scene when that house burned. And my dad, who was a volunteer fireman, like I mentioned, uh, was there. And my dad I asked him, he remembers that house burning down. They did not find a body.
Okay.
And so I thought, oh, that would make sense. And then all of this is in the book. I mean, obviously, I go into a lot more detail, and I changed the identity of, but it's the story is the same.
Yeah.
Um, but I go into the detail of what my friends that first played with it, that burned the board, their experience, and I learned something when I was writing that was I never understood why my friend was targeted, why he was the one that was personally named in the thread. And uh, until I started kind of piecing it together and uh, remembering everything. And I don't want to give it away, but there's a reason why, which is the title of the book, Marked by the Ouija. And there's a reason that he was marked.
Okay.
And I 100% believe that. And it was because he disrespected the board. I didn't realize it until later. And then after that experience, uh, I like I said, I kind of lost myself. I went on my Mormon mission in Detroit, and which was just an incredible experience. I actually, while I was there, I actually got to know on a very personal level Rosa Parks. I,
Oh, wow.
yeah, I every Tuesday for an hour for 6 months, we would sit on her front porch and just talk about everything. And I had no idea who she was. I knew she was somebody because we had to take Rosa Parks Boulevard to get to her house.
Okay.
And we were teaching the lady right next to her, and that was an incredible experience. There was one time that we were we were late. Our appointment was late. And if I know I talk a lot, and I know I've got So tell me if I need to like quiet
No,
down.
you're good. You're good. What I'd like to do is let's put a pin right here at this point because I want to come back to it because I think this is going to be some more information that's going to play into your trajectory. But you had mentioned before you started talking about the experience with the Ouija that you had some other things prior to that that might have opened your eyes to some spiritual experience or something paranormal, so to speak. Were there any of those things that really actually took place prior to that experience?
No, that was the first.
That was the first.
That was the first. I've had um, other uh, basic experiences
Then,
since
okay.
after, but that was the first one, and that experience, uh, uh, and also dealing with the trauma of hating myself internally, and
Yeah.
it all came to a head, and I ended up homeless, and uh, and eventually just came to the I just got tired of hiding who I was, hiding being homeless at this point, hiding who I was. And um, I decided to change it.
Right.
And so I came up with a plan and took steps. And within 6 years of starting to be homeless, I ended up buying my first house and starting my first business in the first month. Or not the first month, in the same month, but it was 6 years after I first started being homeless. And um, you know, that was one of the darkest periods of my life, but it also turned into one of the most uh, uh, influential parts of my life that affected the way that I view things, as well as this experience, the way I view things, the way I viewed myself and believed in myself and others, and responded and reacted to other things, outside of myself. So
Right.
it was you know I'm glad that I went through it. I wouldn't want to do it again, and I wouldn't
Right.
want anyone else to go through it again. But I'm glad that it's in my past.
And was this after the mission trip to Detroit?
So I was on my mission in when I was 19 to 21, and
Okay.
that was early 90s. And then when I was homeless, I was in Atlanta, and this was in my mid 20s.
Okay. So let's go back to second grade because
Okay.
that's where I want to give some of the backstory up until this event takes place. You said you started writing stories in second grade.
Yep.
What was the interest for you to start writing stories? Was it just a release for you, or was it a way for you to work through the internal struggles that you were feeling at that point in time in second grade?
In second grade, I've always loved storytelling.
Okay.
I've always loved making or doing what I can to make people laugh or make people feel good about themselves. Or I think that's, when I was in fourth grade, that's why I dressed up like a clown and went to visit
Right.
my
Yeah.
Uncle Ray, is because
Yep.
I've always loved doing that. So when I was writing those stories, creativity is probably the one thing that I hold closest.
Yeah.
It's something that, besides nature, it's the one thing that makes my life rotate. It makes my life work. And when I'm not creative, and when I have the same feelings. And when I'm not nature, my life starts spinning, and I don't understand things, and I start making bad decisions, which is what I was doing. And those bad decisions led to me being homeless.
Wow.
And so when I was in second grade and I started writing, um, it was I didn't really understand what was going on internally,
Okay.
at that age, but I knew that there was something different in it, but I couldn't put a name to it or a face to it. When I
Right.
was in fifth grade, I remember um, I had the biggest crush on the vice principal, and that was the first time in fifth grade that I started to put a face to it, and that's when I really started to hate myself for it, because everything that I was being taught in church was uh, it was a
Ah,
sin, it was wrong, it was opposite, yeah. And I'm like, well, I'm a good person. I enjoy making other people, or trying to make other people feel good about themselves. Why am I a bad person? I must be helpless and hopeless, and but um, yeah, so I learned that writing later on helped me move through that, kind of process that, and kind of face my demons, face my fears, face the person I was, and come to a conclusion. Like, I had to make a decision. Do I want to be this person? Do I want to be this person? Do I want to look in the back behind me, or do I want to move forward? What type of life do I want? And that life is up to me of how I create it. So that first step is being honest with myself. So that's
yeah.
really what writing had started helping me. But I didn't realize that in second grade. I just, uh, those stories, when I look back, I'm like, wow, what the, What an imagination.
Right, right. What's interesting for me, and the reason that I ask the questions that I do right off the bat, going to the parents and then the grandparents, is I try to see if there's any connection where one of those relatives had that creative flow in them that trickled down. And so far, I hadn't heard any of that come through. And it seems like you may have been the one who was gifted that unique ability to be creative. Is that fair?
I I will say that my dad was a storyteller.
Okay.
Um, um, but um, my dad, as strict as he was, and he and we didn't get along. I believe he hated me, and I didn't like him for the first 20 years of my life, and that changed, but later on, thankfully. But yeah, uh, I can't think of anyone except for my dad. My uncle, my mom's brother.
Yeah, yeah.
He was an interesting character. He loved to tell stories. He was a true cowboy,
Okay.
and he was talented, but it was all his 4 foot 6 frame, in the army. I mean, he didn't back down to anybody, and but he and my dad were the only ones that that's a really interesting question because I've never really thought about that. Where did I get that?
Right.
I, I that's going to make me think about this a lot longer
Okay.
after today.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. For sure. And the way that it plays out for me, listening to your story, is you were gifted this ability to create worlds, to create stories, different things like that. And also too, the other side of you that is most creative is your connection to nature and the outdoors, right? The way
Absolutely.
that the way that I look at that, right, is that everybody has the potential to be creative if they work at it and practice it. And it's a part of us that if we nourish it and nurture it, it will expand and grow. Some of us are given something that is really unexplainable to anybody else around us. We have just this extra level of ability to be creative. Um, and I have always viewed that we have been given the gift of the creator, which can play into that religious background that we grew up in, or it can play into the spiritual side of things of been given this ability and this talent to continue to make things beautiful, to expand people's points of view, to expand that um, thought within others. Also, too, the connection to nature is that connection to the creator again, because that's the world that was given to us, right?
Yep.
Native culture looks at that as a gift and as the thing that sustains and builds life force within us. Also, too, there's a component within the native culture where they believe that a child up to the age of 7, which is, I would venture to say, is probably when you were in second grade. I remember that's how old I was in second grade. Up to the age of 7, they're still connected to the other side, meaning they have one foot in one world and one foot in the other, so to speak. They still have that connection to pre-birth consciousness and experience. And in that process, after 7, it has a tendency to go away. Now, the reason I say that at this point in the conversation is because when I was little, before even second grade, I would see spirits in our house. And I never never said anything about it to my parents, never understood what it was, didn't able have the ability to put words to it because I didn't understand it. And it was a male and female adult, and then a male and female children that would come. They would come in a group of four, or the adult male would come by himself. And he was the one who had the strongest energy that was not pleasant in any way, shape, or form. And I could always tell when either him or they were coming because I could sense that energy that he was emitting
Yeah.
right off the bat, even before it would come into my perceived point of view. Now, the adult female and the two children, they were very kind, very soft. They were always interested in trying to connect with me. And me being a little kid, every time that would happen, I would just put my head down, try to make sure that they couldn't see me, but yet they're there, they'd see me. Try to ignore them as much as possible because I didn't want to connect with them. I didn't want to, you know, be seen by them, even though I was. I was trying to hide myself.
Acknowledge their presence, acknowledge their existence. You know,
Yeah.
because what? Sorry for interrupting, but you
No,
said something that it took me years to understand it. It wasn't until after I wrote, Marked by the Ouija, that I understood it. And what you said, and is so true, is that it's hard for you to process what you don't understand.
correct.
And so you try to put a face to that to help, in our humanity, we try to put a face to it to help us understand what's going on, or what it is, that why we're feeling this way. And when we can't do that because we don't know what's going on, that makes it worse. And that's where the fear comes in. That's where,
Yeah.
that's, I would imagine that that's probably what you were feeling, is like, you don't
Yeah.
understand this, and you can't put a face to it. And so it, I'm going to hide from it.
Right.
And I think that's something that I've found, I said later in life, but it's very, very true. And
Yeah.
I thought that was really interesting. When you said that, I'm like, wow, you're the first person that actually has verbalized it, since I've realized it. And I've talked about it quite a bit, but
Yeah.
you're the first person that actually, I feel, actually truly understands it.
Yeah. No, for sure. I definitely understand it almost intrinsically, which, it allows me to have a conversation like this where that can come up and it's able to be expressed openly rather than any other forms of judgment or anything like that, right? And that's for me, that's the whole purpose of me trying to create and build this platform, is so that these conversations can be turned up in volume, especially with the component of the mental health, because in the creative community, it's not talked about. It's not talked about enough in general society. Um, and it's even more tamped down in the creative community, the mental health struggles that take place. So that's what I'm trying to do. That's what I'm trying to convey. That's what I'm trying to put out there, is create a space where the other person who's on the other side of the screen and the microphone is comfortable enough to be able to start expressing and talking about things that they've experienced, so somebody else can hear it and be like, oh, wow, I relate to that completely. I'm glad that I'm not alone anymore.
Rich, I don't know if you believe um, that things happen for a reason. I do.
Oh, yes,
I
absolutely.
very much. So it's just back to back things that you've said that um, just hit home with me. So when I was marketing this book, um, I I I didn't know. I mean, the content. I mean, I knew that the content was going to freak people out.
Yeah.
I, you know, I think anyone who's creative that puts anything personal out there is always scared, for one thing or another. And of course I was, but after when I was marketing the book, I had, and also going to different shows and messages on social media. I have probably thousands of people from all over the world that sent me messages, or I talked to or had conversations with, that told me that when they read the book, it did exactly what you
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
said. It put a voice. I'm not alone. And the one thing, this is something that I get really kind of emotional about, because I I have been thoroughly inspired by these people who have had these paranormal traumatic experiences
Yeah.
and haven't have felt invisible or unheard. Oh, I've talked to
Oh,
people who have
wow.
been bullied. I've talked to people who have been kicked out of their homes, their family. They've lost their job. They've lost their friends, and so they just bottle it up, and they can't talk about it. And when I related to that, you know, with my experience, but also when I was trying to come out, when I was coming out as
Yeah.
gay, I couldn't talk about it. I couldn't tell people. So I know how that feels, not only coming out, but also my Ouija experience. And the most surprising thing happened is I realized that I was creating, uh, wasn't planned. I was creating a safe space for these people to have conversations
Yeah.
and be able to work through their trauma without the fear of being judged or bullied. And when you just said that, I'm like, I when I took my breath away. I'm like, wow. I mean, that's why I say I think things happen for a reason. We were meant to talk and have this conversation, because your what you're doing with your podcast is what I strongly believe, and what I'm doing with my book. I feel, uh,
Yeah.
and it is so needed. And the more that I talk to, I've had people that have sent me messages and things saying, um, it going back to put a face with it, put a face with fear. It helped them to face, the more that they could talk about it, the more you talk about it, you kind of work through that trauma, and
Yes.
you can't bottle it in. The more you work through that trauma, the more confident you get, and then you can face that fear, and you can leave that fear in the past. You can leave that experience in the past where it's not affecting your future. And that's
Yeah.
what you're doing. And I absolutely love that, because it is so needed, especially now. And there's just not a lot of, especially when it comes to paranormal experiences. There's not a lot of experiences. Now, on the flip side, I also got death threats, because of the book, and I spent about 2 weeks that looking over my shoulder, because these were religious zealots that said that I was spreading demonic information, and
Okay.
when they found me, they're going to wipe me from the earth. And I spent about 2 weeks looking over my shoulder and really freaking out. That's why I took everything that identified with where my location was off my website after they, and but after a couple of weeks, and the more experiences that I had with marketing, with these people coming and telling me that I'm in a safe space, and that, hey, I realize I'm not alone. I'm not invisible in this. I like, if you can be strong and courageous with what you've been through, I can as well. And that's when things shifted and changed for me. And I'm like, I'm not going to be scared anymore. It is my experience. It happened. I have proof. My friend lost his life. Um,
Yeah.
and that just took my breath away when you said that. And thank you for doing that, because like I said, I mean, I've talked to a lot of people that feel like they can't. talk openly and honestly about it, and they can't work through that trauma because they don't have a safe space. So thank you.
Yeah,
That's really, really important for people to know.
absolutely. And I appreciate that words, Scott. Definitely. It to hear it recognized, that's what matters, right? Sometimes you get caught in the struggle of doing because you think it's not going anywhere. But when I have a conversation like this and it's recognized, it's like, okay, just one more down, keep going,
Yep.
just doing them one at a time, keep having the conversation.
Um,
That's and to your point about that of touching people's lives as creatives, it still takes me back to that point of you didn't really have anyone else other than just the verbal storytellers that was being that creative, right? That was literally using a pencil and paper and creating. And that's where sometimes I believe those gifts are given for a particular purpose. And we don't understand that until maybe later on, years go by, till we step into something and start doing it and start realizing, oh, this is what I was meant to be doing all along. Like, why couldn't I get this information years prior? But that whole scenario is based off of if you don't go through the things that you experience up to now, today, February 20th, right? It it wouldn't be the same. You wouldn't be in the same place to be able to have the conversation, to share the experience, and then for others to be able to hear that as well and touch them. So it all plays together. It's just I don't think people are able to connect the dots so much because it seems far fetched that that might be the case. But you and I both believe that things happen because of a particular purpose and a reason. So that's just what we keep doing. We keep moving. We keep creating. We keep trying to touch one people at a time so that they can.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say so they can just tap into us and realize, oh wow, I'm not alone.
No, I 100%. I I've always felt that I was, creative. I can, even though I didn't really understand it.
Yeah.
I can think back about when I was 8, when I was in second grade, and I was writing these stories. I remember I set a goal that I wanted to get something published. I mean, it took 38 years to
Oh,
do it, but I did
yeah,
it.
yeah.
But I remember back then that this is probably the first time that I really in second, third grade time when when I think about it, I think that's really when my you talk about flexing your creative muscle. I agree. The more you practice it, the better you get at it, and not just with everything else. And when I was in second or third grade, I remember my dog. I've always loved dogs as well. And when my dog was um, uh, having her babies, I made her uh, a hotel hospital
Okay.
in my room, and my mom walked in, and my mom has always been very supportive of my creativity. Even though sometimes she didn't really understand it, but she walked in my
Sure.
room, and I had made this big dog hotel hospital with out of cardboard boxes with different rooms. When you look down on it, it almost looked like a maze. It
Yeah.
had doorways going in, and so the mom could go and each puppy had its own room. And my
Right.
mom walked in and she looked at it. She's like, "When did you do this?" And she's like, "I'm like." To me, it was like each puppy deserves their own room,
Right.
but that's the first time that I could really put my finger on a specific moment that I actually used my mind for creativity and then actually did something about it. I mean, I can't think of anything before that, but and since then, I think that gave me a little bit more confidence in the creative side of it. And um, look where I am today. And
Right.
actually, my business, when I started my first business, it's a trade show and event business, and that's all about creativity. I mean, my clients pay me to create their environment, their displays, and their exhibit for when they go to these different shows. And I've that really helped to really uh, give me a lot of experience, a lot of practice and exercise in the creativity, and looking outside the box. And and what you said about being able to talk about it now versus before, it's all these
Yeah.
experiences that kind of made each of us who we are now, and that's why we respond and react and handle things and manage things the way that we do now is because of all these experiences, and good and bad. I
Yeah.
it's it going through the bad ones. It's hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel, but just like creatives, I'm sure you've felt. You mentioned kind of referred to it earlier that you felt that, and all of us feel that, like, "Ugh, I can't do this. It's not making a difference. It's too time
Yeah.
consuming. It's too expensive. No one really cares except for me. I'm going to
Yeah.
quit." But you find a way to keep going, and then later on you realize, wow, even though you didn't see it in the moment, you've got to have faith and belief that that the effort you're putting out there is going to help somebody, help
Yeah.
them not make the same mistake you made, help teach them something new, with this, with creating that safe space and wanting to help people, want to give a voice to those people who have been dealing with paranormal trauma, and give them a safe space to really deal with that and talk to. And I tell everyone, like, I will stop and talk to anyone about it because I know how important it is. But there were certain, I actually put a plan together. I'm like, there's the book. And I'm like, all right, but not everyone reads. And so I wrote a short film about that, because I thought, all right, well, uh, maybe someone who doesn't read will watch the short film. And I'm trying to get that funding for that. But, and then the other project was, we're doing a documentary about true experiences, and we're actually in editing process there. So I've got the book, I've got the movie, and I've got the TV aspect of it. Trying to cover all bases to be able to get it out there, because like exactly what you said, the more you talk about it, the more that you can put a face to that fear and say, you know what, um, it, it's it's not something to be afraid of once
Right.
you understand it, because once you understand it, you respect it like nature. You get out there and you respect nature, and you have a much better experience. I've had more spiritual experiences in nature than
Yeah.
I ever had in a church or in a building, or which kind of goes in what you were saying earlier about that connection to a higher power in nature, is because that's when I've had my most deepest spiritual experiences, what I would consider spiritual experiences. But
Yeah. For sure.
well, you're checking off those boxes and putting every nail in the head. I'm like, I love this.
No, that's cool. That's cool. Back to storyline. Fifth grade, you got the crush on the assistant principal. You have this realization within yourself of, well, I'm different. I'm not like the other people or the other guys in my class. I have a different perspective. I have a different interest. And it starts to become turmoil for you. 16, you get a job, you move out, living with some guys, and then that creates a new environment for you. But as you were explaining it, you still have this inner turmoil to where you're thinking, I'm losing myself. I don't know who I am. Go on this mission trip, and it's to Detroit. What was the original idea of needing to come to Detroit on a mission trip with the the church environment that you had there that made that choice of this is where we're going to go versus anywhere else? What was that mindset like?
So when you in the Mormon church, you don't actually get to choose where you go. The
Okay.
church actually assigns where you're going to go.
Gotcha.
And so when, I had a lot of friends that went international, but we all go at that time, we all went to the MTC, the Mormon Training Center in Provo, Utah. And like I was there for several weeks, learning that, the lessons and, how to teach. And, they taught me what we call the commitment pattern. And, that taught me my work ethic because, you get up and at 6 o'clock in the morning and you're going until 9 o'clock at night. You don't listen to the news. You don't watch TV. You don't listen to the radio. You don't read books or magazines, newspapers. You're focused on that.
Yeah.
And so it was a very good experience in that aspect. It
Okay.
taught me a lot of things. My mom had always wanted a missionary in her immediate family, and I was the first one that went. And who would, who would have thought? I'm like, oh my gosh, now I'm not even a member anymore. And when I decided to leave the church, so I went. Not necessarily to appease my mom. I went because I thought that it would fix my
What's going on?
bigot. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought, I just need to throw more religion at it, and then that's going to fix me. And so I went. And
The interesting part about what you just said there is the fact that you already mentioned this earlier. When you get to Detroit, you strike up a friendship with Rosa Parks, who, from my personal experience of being in the Metro Detroit area, she already has this nonconformist mentality, right?
yep.
So the fact that that's the person that you connected to when you get here in Detroit on this mission trip that you think is going to change who you are, you end up talking with one of the greatest names in history of being a nonconformist. Once you start having these conversations with her, and you described it as becoming a friendship, what were some of the things that you were hearing from her that allowed you to feel comfortable enough to keep coming back and talking to her?
Good question. And I've never been asked that before, and I love it. So we were teaching the lady next to her, teaching her the lessons. And the first time that at that point, there was, at that time, there was commercials on TV where people could order a Book of Mormon, and then we
Yeah.
would go and deliver it. Or we would go what we call trapting, and we'd go door to door like Jehovah's
Yeah.
Witnesses, even though the religion's very different. So that's how we were introduced to her neighbor, and that's why we started teaching her neighbor. Well, we were there, and there was this woman that was sitting on her front porch, and she's looked at, and she's like, "Who are you boys? And what are you doing?" And it wasn't accusatory. It was,
Right.
sometimes in Detroit, we you,
Yeah.
you feel that way,
Yeah.
and but I never ever got that feeling, and I didn't even know her name. I didn't know who she was, because
Yeah.
what she was famous for happened before I was born,
Right.
and they didn't teach that. Even after, they didn't teach that in school.
Yep.
So I had no idea, but like I said, I knew that she was somebody, because we had to take Rosa Parks Boulevard to get there. And I remember when we would come down there, and as soon as we turned left off Rosa Parks Boulevard, she was about 2 blocks down. And there were more times than not that she had these two big columns on each side of her steps going up to her deck, her front porch. And she would be holding on with, actually, it would be her left arm, and she'd be leaning out, and she knew, like, all right, we're going to be here at 2 o'clock on Tuesday, every Tuesday. And so she'd be waving. And she never once, that I remember, mentioned what she was known for.
Right.
And we didn't try to convert her or teach her. It was one of those just pure relationships,
Yeah.
pure
Yeah.
friendships that we just, I feel just eternally grateful that to have that experience. And, you know, I don't remember a lot of the content that we actually talked about, but I do remember that she never talked about what she was famous for. She asked about our families. She was just extremely kind, just sweet person, and you could feel that. And I mean, example is she loved, as far as her how kind and giving she was. Uh, Coincidentally, I don't know why or how this happened, but every single time, during the time that we're there, the ice cream truck would go by.
Okay.
And the
Yeah.
music and everything. And so it was important to her. She wanted to buy Micah Pennant and I an ice cream, a dollar ice cream cone. So
Yeah.
one time the appointment went late with her neighbor, because we always go talk to her before, then go teach her neighbor, then come and say goodbye and go.
Yeah.
But the appointment went a little bit longer, and the ice cream truck passed. And we came out, she was standing on the sidewalk in front of her neighbor's house with $2 up. And she's like, I couldn't hold him. She's like, jump on your bikes and chase him down. So we took off. About 3 weeks later, the appointment went a little bit longer, and we're standing on this lady's front porch, and she's in her doorway looking over her shoulder. I can hear the ice cream truck back there, but we're setting up the next appointment.
Yeah.
And I could see, I remember the lady, she kept looking over my shoulder, and she says, sorry for interrupting. She's like, you boys best go. Miss Parks is waiting for you. And this is true, 100%. I turn around, and the ice cream truck was here, and she's standing in front of it. It backs up and starts to go around this way, and she stands in front of it. Backs
Oh
up,
my
starts
God.
to, and she's like, "You're not leaving till I buy my boys some ice cream." So the lady, she's like, "You boys best go. Miss Park's waiting for you." And it was just that experience is one of the things I will cherish and hold the rest of my life. Fast forward till about maybe about 5 years ago, 5, 6 years ago. Yeah, it was probably 5 or 6 years ago. I remember the day she died, and that's when it really hit me how valuable and uh, how much of an amazing experience that was. But about 5 years
Yeah.
ago, I have a trade show in Detroit that I've got clients that go to. So I thought, I'm going to go in early. I'm going to go to her gravesite. I'm going to pay my respects. So I went over to Woodlawn Cemetery, and I couldn't find where she was. I found Aretha Franklin's
Right.
burial spot in the building. And the Four Tops and all this, but I could not find her. So I went to the operations office, and they're like, "Why did you want to pay? Yeah, you're clearly not family." And I told her the story, and by the time I finished, she was crying, and she said, "Miss Parks would be thrilled to have you visit her." She said, "That's her building right there." I had walked around that building. There was no marking on the outside, and it was key card or code to get in.
Yeah.
She
Yeah.
told me the code, and I went in for about 45 minutes, and I told her everything that uh, I wanted to tell her, how much that experience meant to me. And I cried a little bit, and it was just a really magical experience for me. And um, you know, the more that I've shared that and see and feel other people's reactions and response to that, it just reinforces how special that is, because
Oh
she
yeah.
was a remarkable lady, and there was no judgment.
Yeah.
Um, there was nothing but love and kindness, and
Yeah.
support. She was an amazing lady, and that left a mark on my life among millions and millions of other people for history.
Yeah, definitely. That is an amazing story. Uh, Thank you for sharing that and going back there with me, because I knew when I asked to put a pin in it that it was going to be pivotal, but I didn't know how much of an impact um, that it would have. But It's a tremendous, tremendous story, especially from the perspective of her neighbor, right? Knowing, hey, fellas, you've done enough with me today. Miss Parks is waiting on you. You better get out there. Otherwise, she's going to keep doing whatever she needs to do to make sure she connects with you. And
He was
the
not
fact
letting
that
that
she's
ice cream
standing
truck
in,
move.
yeah, exactly. The fact that she's standing in front of the ice cream truck saying, no, you can't go around me. I need to buy these boys some ice cream. That
Yeah,
in and
it
of
was
itself, I mean, that could be a book all by its own if you decide in the future that might be something that needs to be put out there more. But wow, that's an incredible story to have, and I can only imagine how much that's cherished within your heart to have experienced it.
uh, it I mean, I can't even put words to it, you know. It's just it's one of those things that, you know, for years I'm like, did I imagine this? Am I making this up? You
Yeah.
know, and I talked to a few of my you know, because in when you're on a mission, and not only do you not get to choose where you go, they tell you where you're going to go. You have to pay for it pretty much yourself.
Right.
And you have your companion, and you're always with your companion. You never lose sight of your companion for a variety of safety reasons and things.
Right.
And and I had some experiences in Detroit. You know, one time we were going to her house, and there was a school, a big school right on Rosa Parks Boulevard, and we were on bikes, and I was training a new missionary, and at this point I was probably not even 20 yet.
Right.
And we were heading to go meet with her before we had our appointment with her next door neighbor. And this school was rioting. They were out in the streets. I remember they were throwing those metal garbage can, not the same type of garbage can that my
Yeah.
friends
Yeah.
burned. It was like with the grates, you know. They
Yep.
were throwing those around. There were three guys that were trying to turn a car over.
Oh wow.
And I remember the look on that woman's face in the car. And my companion said, you know, we'd stopped about a half a block before, and it was really contained to that one block. And so we stopped about half a block before, and he's like, "What do we do?" And I said, "Tuck your pant leg in, you know, to your sock, or if you had one of the straps, you know, so your pant leg didn't get caught in your um,
Spokes.
the spokes." Yeah, you know,
Yeah.
like we're going through it. I said, "Don't make eye contact, keep your head down and go." And we started going through, and I broke my own rule. I looked up and saw somebody, and this kid, and I remember the fury, the anger. I don't know what was going on, what caused it.
Right.
I remember his look was it was frightening. Yeah, I mean, it scared the hell out of me. And I'm like, pedal. And all of a sudden I hear, get him. And I remember rocks coming all
Oh
around
wow.
us. And a few people started chasing us, but they didn't get us. And we got there, and she didn't know anything about it, but it was always just a bright spot, you know, that I looked forward to. And I wish that, you know, one of the things I told her when I went to pay my respects in her little her building was, uh, I said, I wish, looking back, I try to live my life with no regrets, but I wish that I would have uh, understood who she was more, because I have a million questions. But as soon as I said it, I thought, you know what? That's what made it special, is because everyone else is asking her about her experience, and it's for a purpose. There was no
Right.
purpose for me, my companion. We were just talking to this nice lady, and built a friendship with her, and it was pure. It was just, you know, there was no ulterior motives. That we weren't trying to, you know, get a news story or anything. So I think that's what made it special. As soon as I asked that question, I'm like, oh, scratch that. Sorry, I didn't mean that. I'm glad that it went down the way it did, and that we had the interaction that we did, because that's what made it special.
Yeah,
There was no preconceived notion to it.
for sure. For sure. I could say this, Scott. She's hearing every word you're saying right now. She knows your heart. And if if you're at any time out in the woods, because I believe the woods and the wilderness and nature is a conduit. Um, if you started talking to her next time you're out there and you're quiet enough and focused enough, I would venture to say you might get another visit with her.
That right, I can't even imagine how. I mean, nothing is going to be able to top, the initial experience. But
For sure. For sure.
that would be amazing, just to know that she remembers it.
Yeah.
And she valued, and I, there's no doubt in my mind that she valued it as much as I did, just by her reaction when we would turn that corner and she was so excited to see us.
Yeah.
I don't know what else was going on in her life at that point, but, or, I know that she ended up losing her house and she was assaulted. I mean, multiple times after I met her. So, there were other things going on, but it was just a bright spot in each of our day that, and I know that she valued it as much as I did, just by her reaction.
For sure.
You know, so I wouldn't change anything about it, and if I
Yeah.
had the chance to be able to hear from her again or talk to her again, I would jump on it in a heartbeat. And I will do
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Okay.
You
Cool.
could be sure that I will do that.
Good deal. Good deal. I hope you do. Once you get back from Detroit, and I, I'm imagining that didn't change who you were, obviously, because
Yep.
you said some things started taking place and eventually you were homeless for a little while. How did you start navigating through that experience once you got back and trying to deal with life after that event?
So when I came back, um, it is, and I don't know if it's the same way now. I believe it is, because I left the church years ago.
Yeah.
But at that point, it was widely expected that as soon as you come home from mission, you get married and start having kids.
Okay.
And so when I came home, I knew that that was the expectation of, for me. And I ended up, moving in. I came home to Idaho, and I ended up moving to California and moving in with, um, one of my friends who was also a different boss of mine that I was
Okay.
friends with. I ended up moving in with him and his wife, and I was there for. I went to, that was in, Roseville, California, just outside Sacramento, and I did 2 semesters of college. I was working 2 full-time jobs and going to school full time. Um, just hearing that now, it makes me tired. I don't know how I did it, but I started having those feelings again, and my friend and his wife were, very conservative. And
Okay.
they're members of the church, and I knew that they, uh, didn't approve of it. And so I got to the point where I'm like, you know what, I need to either address this or find a way to get past it. And so I went to my first gay bar, and I remember I walked in. It was a bar in Sacramento, California, called Faces. I walked in. I paid my $5 cover charge. Walked in and saw 2 girls. Literally, I walked in past
The
the
entry.
bouncer,
Yeah.
and went into the hallway, turned left, saw 2 girls dancing, and ran out. And the bouncer grabbed my arm as I'm running out and said, "Hey, you want your $5 back?" Like, and that, I'm like, it just freaked me out, And so I thought, all right, I'm still dealing with this, and I don't know how to get past it.
Right.
But I thought, I'm in Southern California, Central California. I'm living with, um, 2 people that, I'm lying to. And I've always tried to be honest, with everyone, but clearly not myself at the time. So I
Right.
thought, I need to leave. And so I moved to Salt Lake, and which is the Mormon world headquarters. And my thought there is, I thought, I'll move there, and all my problems, just like I thought about my mission, all my problems are going to be gone because I'm going to immerse myself in Salt Lake City, and the Mormon Tabernacle Choir is just going to roll through the valley, and I'll wake up and hear, and it's going to solve everything. Well, that clearly didn't happen, and I ended up, I was living with my aunt, and I ended up, um, I started working at a hotel, and one of the guys that I worked with was gay, and he was the first gay person that I'd ever talked to. And he worked the graveyard shift. He was the night auditor, and I worked the shift right before him. But my shift ended, and he came in and started his shift, and I stayed there, and for 8 hours, I drilled him full of questions, just asking him everything that I could think of, and he answered him, and I'm grateful for that, that he was so honest with me, because
Yeah.
that kind of helped me put a face to some of the feelings that I was feeling,
Yeah.
and didn't really know how to deal with it or understand it. And he took me to my second gay bar, which is called the Sun, which still to this day is in Salt Lake City. It's not there; it's burned down several times, but to this day, it's still one of the funnest bars I've been to. But I ended up meeting somebody who's from New York City, and visiting his mom, who was also a member of the church.
Okay.
So I went out to meet him. To get, I'd never been to New York City, so I went out to spend a week with him. Not romantic or anything. It didn't start out romantic, but he ended up introducing me to someone else who ended up becoming my first long-term relationship. And I ended up coming home from that New York trip and selling my car, selling all my furniture, everything that I had accumulated, and buying a one-way ticket to New York. And my friends at the time said, "Wow, you go to New York and come back," and it's like, most people come out of the closet gradually. You come out with rocket boosters on, and I'm like, you know what? Go big or go home, right?
Hey, yeah. Yeah.
So I ended up doing that, and um, uh, I was with him for about a couple of years. He cheated on me quite a few times, and convinced me that it was my fault. And so we ended up moving to Atlanta. And when we moved to Atlanta, that's the point where, after dealing with that, and I did again that experience with, um, he cheated on me 146 times. Kept a
Oh,
log. I found the log.
what?
And yeah, and that I was so young and naive. I just kept going, "Oh, it's just my fault." So we ended up moving to Atlanta because he's like, "Oh, we need to get out of New York City." And when we moved, that was the point where we were buying a house together. And at that point, I made a promise to myself. I'm like, I will never lie to myself again, and I will never lie to anyone else again about
Yeah.
this. If someone asks me, I'm going to do it. So we'd flown into, we'd bought the house, and it was being built, and we were in a hotel, and I was so excited because we just closed on the house. And I'm like, I got to tell somebody about it. It's my first house. Yeah, I'm 22 years old. No, at that point, I take it back, 23 years old. And uh, so I called my sister. And when I lived in New York, I started, obviously I'm in my first gay relationship, but I started to really kind of to deal with it. And I knew at some point I was going to have to come out. So I'm like, I couldn't expect my family to understand my feelings. So I didn't want to spring it on them. I wanted to
Right.
gradually warm them up. So I started writing them a letter every week. I would write them a letter. I'm like, "Oh, I worked at one of our studio store at the time, and I'm like, "Oh, I met a guy. Oh, he's a really good friend. Oh," the next week, "Oh, I mentioned his name." And then after
Yeah.
several letters of that, "Oh, I just found out he was gay." I'm like, I don't know how to deal with that. And it just kept progressing and progressing, to where, when I was, in that hotel room and I called my sister, she said, she said, "I've got a question for you." And I'm like, hold on a second. And I was sitting on the bed in the hotel room. I put the phone on the bed, put a pillow over it, and sat on it. And I'm like, she's going to ask me. She's going to ask me. I'm like, I promised myself I'm going to be
Yes.
honest. So I'm like, what's your question? And she said, "Are you and this person involved?" And I said, "Yeah, yeah, we're buying a house, we're friends." And she's like, "No, that's not what I'm asking. Are you involved?"
Right.
And I knew what she was talking about. And I'm like, "Yes." And she said, "I thought so." And what I found out years, later. So my family, obviously, my sister was the first person to know.
Okay.
Uh, what happened after that? I wasn't allowed home for 4 years. My With the exception of my sister, pretty much my family disowned me. My dad was like, he's not my son anymore. Like I said, I wasn't allowed home. And uh, eventually, things changed. And my sister told me, because I did still maintain contact with her. And she said, "All right, it's time for you to come home. Dad may not be here when you're here, but you need to come home and deal with this." And
Okay.
and what I found out years later is my sister-in-law told me that my oldest brother, um, had had enough of it, and he called a family meeting, and he told my family, he said, "Look, we don't have to understand it. We don't have to agree with it, but we have to accept it. And if we don't accept it, then we're going to lose Scott forever. And none of us
Oh,
want." And which is true. He knew me. That's
yeah. Yeah.
exactly what would have happened. And so they came together as a family and said, "We don't understand it. We don't agree with it. But if this is what you feel you are, then you're more important to us than that." And that was just really pivotal to me, that
Oh,
they could, because my family, they, not my dad, but my dad didn't grow up Mormon, but everyone else did, and they went through the same,
right.
doctrine that I did.
Yep.
So for them
Yep.
to step outside of that and just open up their understanding, like, "Look, we don't get it, but we'll accept it." I thought that was pretty remarkable.
Oh,
Uh,
for sure.
and that changed. That was what started to change my relationship with my family, and that kind of helped me. Now, that being said, after that experience, going through, by that point, I was with him for several years in Atlanta as well. And finally, I'm like, I can't take the cheating anymore. I can't take the gaslighting. This isn't my fault. This is your fault. And
Right.
so I ended up moving out, and it really hit me emotionally. And for years, I mean, when I say years, I'm talking 20 years. I didn't trust hardly anyone, and that had a snowball effect in so many other things. And that's, I believe, one of the things that led me to be homeless. And then, of course, I was humiliated. My friends, when I say homeless, I wasn't living on the street homeless. I was living in my car. But
Gotcha.
everything I own, it was a white Geo Metro. My friends called it the girl skate, like the girls' roller skates. We called it the girl skate because it was about that big.
Yeah.
And everything that I owned was in my trunk. And um, I what when I was there, yeah, I had enough of the shame, and
Right.
that promise that I had made to myself years earlier, that I would be honest with myself and honest with everyone else.
Right.
Uh, I didn't. I wasn't on it because I didn't tell anyone at the time that I was living in my car. I would go to different gyms. "Oh, I'm interested," and they're like, "Oh,
Right.
look, you can get a free pass or whatever." I would go there and shower. Or I would go over to my friend's house. I'm like, oh yeah, I've just been out running, and can I use your shower? And so they didn't know it, but what pulled me out of it is the brother that called the family meeting when I was probably, I don't know, 10 or 11. I was in his room and he came home and kicked me out. He was really angry. And, I was in my room,
Overnight stuff. Yeah.
emotional crying and everything. And he went back, and this is kind of gives you an idea of what the person he is. He's remarkable. He went back into his room and he's like, he was in here looking for something. I was in there listening to his Kiss records. That's what I was doing.
Oh,
Yeah. But he's like, he's in here for something. And he just reached up and grabbed this book that I don't think he's ever read.
okay.
But it had, on the end of the book, it had his name. And he just came in and he threw it to me and he said, here, you wanted something, take this. He did not know that book would change my life. The book is called The Magic of Thinking Big by David Schwartz. I read that book and it changed the way that I viewed myself. It changed the way that I viewed my environment, how I viewed other people, how I viewed how I responded to different situations. And eventually I come up with a plan. This is what I'm going to do to stop being homeless. And I did it. And within 6 years, I mentioned earlier, within 6 years, I had bought my first house by myself. That's my only house by myself. And I started my trade show business in the same month. And, I'm really proud of that, but that I was able to do that, but I give all the credit to that book. And I wouldn't have had that book had I not had that experience when I was 10, when my brother just, here, through it, and I give that book. That book was written in the 80s and it still holds true. I give that book out to everyone who's struggling with their identity or whenever I feel like my life is starting to spiral, I'll pull that book out. I'm on my third book now. That one that he gave me, I read several times and I highlighted and I took notes and studied but I've read that book 11 times now. And whenever I feel, that I need to, the two things that ground me are nature, and I'll read that book again. So that book changed my life. And I would, anyone that is struggling with, they feel like their life is spiraling and they're having trouble finding that direction, pick up that book. Read it. I've given it to people who are not readers, and it's taken a little bit longer to get through it, but they have had similar experiences I have. I haven't talked to one person that I've given the book to that has come back and said, I didn't do anything. Every single 100% has come back and said, wow, I can't believe how my life is different because of that. And I don't think David Schwartz, when he wrote that, had any idea that
Right.
it would have such a incredible reach. The other thing that really kind of changed my my thought process is when I was in junior high, my typing teacher, sorry, she was my English lit teacher. Her name was Miss Anderson. I don't know why she singled me out, but after class one day, the bell rang and everyone was leaving. She's like, Scott, I want to see you. And I don't know, maybe she was more intuitive and she felt my inner struggle, because at this point I had had that experience in 5th grade. I realized I was different and I was feeling that, I hate myself, but I kind of feel like this is who I am. And if this is who I am, then this is a horrible person, but this is not the person that I believe that I am, going through a limit. And she called me up and she said, I'm going to tell you something. I know you didn't ask for it, but I'm going to tell you. And she's like, take with it, or take it and do with it whatever you will. You can forget it, whatever. She said, the best advice I've ever got in my life. She said, you only get 2 bad days a year. You get to choose those 2 days, but you only have 2. So choose wisely. And what I realized, I put that to work. That stuck in my head. And what I realized years later, after she had passed away, I had written her a letter to thank her for that years, when I was in Atlanta years later, and that's
Yeah.
when I found out she had passed away. But I started thinking about that, and I'm like, wow, I've had years without what I would consider a bad day, because when I started to have one, I'm like, "Ugh, I don't know if I want to use one of my 2 days because I might have a worse one later on." And then if it
Ah,
gets to the end of the year, I didn't have any bad days. And it just, it kind of, it not kind of, it coincided with what that book taught me. So those two experiences really shaped uh, the person that I wanted to be. And, and my mom was super positive and optimistic as well. So
mm,
that kind of helped me get out of the homelessness, deal with my inner turmoil, deal with my identity, who I was, what I was, what I wanted to be, who I wanted to be, and create my future. And I will always give the credit to that, because I wouldn't have been, I believe I wouldn't have been able to make it through, or I wouldn't be who I am today if it wasn't for Miss Anderson and my brother giving me that book. They're very pivotal points in my life.
yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. One of the things that I do find as a through line with each one of these conversations that I have, that a lot of times there are those people at pivotal points in our lives that just recognize something within us and give a word of encouragement that never leaves our mind.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that you rattled off the name that fast, that says something in and of itself. Um, the other component that I relate to for sure is when you went into your brother's room looking for that Kiss album to listen to. The first album I ever bought for myself was Dressed to Kill by Kiss. And the reason I wanted it because they were in full makeup, but they were dressed in suits. They had ties on, but then again, you look down and they got those high platform shoes on, and it's like that was so cool to me back then. And it was like, man, and I've always enjoyed their music across the years. I think they should be the gold standard for marketing and IP branding. Uh, what's the word I want to use? Taking
Uh,
it to the fullest extent. Like they monetize that so well and um, so much, and still are doing it to this day. Even though they're retired, they own all of that IP, and they're still monetizing it. And it's going to be that way for their children and everything
yeah.
going forward. I think they should be the gold standard for every marketing class that's taught in America. Um,
Just their evolution,
oh
you
yeah,
know. I mean, they're just, maybe not just as popular, but when they decided to drop the makeup,
yeah,
they were still making great music. That makeup didn't change who they were.
right,
It gave them a character to play.
yep,
Like uh, Lady Gaga. When she started,
yeah,
she and Madonna as well. You come out and you're creating a persona, but
yep,
you kind of what we were talking about before. That soul in us stays the same. You might change your shell,
yep,
but that soul stays the same. And that's what I see with Kiss. And I remember watching that whole transition of how they changed. I don't know all the details of why they truly decided to go without makeup, but I thought that was a really remarkable transition. And even losing what that signature that made them,
yeah,
their music made them Kiss, but it was also the makeup. you know they were still made great music and still were popular, even when their Tears Were Falling, later on. And
yep,
that was still great music.
for
And,
sure.
it was cool to see that transition. And I agree that it should be the gold standard for marketing, because you can change uh change. I don't. You're not changing who you are. You're
Right.
changing how people view you, but
Yes.
people are still connecting to that soul in you.
Yep.
And yeah, that was that's funny. Yeah, there's obviously Kiss is super popular and always has been, but it seems like I don't talk to many people that
Have a connection
that
like that.
yeah or that will admit to loving Kiss as much.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I used to play Detroit Rock City, and so loud, and then my brother, I'd see my brother come up, like, oh, I need to get out, but he caught me that time, and I'm glad he did. I mean, again, things happen for a reason,
Right.
because
Right.
that was a domino effect, and now kind of like what we were talking about earlier, about the safe space. We don't know how this experience or this response is going to affect us, but we don't may not understand it, but years down the road it ends up benefiting so many other people. And I think that my brother had no idea by giving me that book that it would change my life, and then years later I would give it out to other people and it would change their life. I mean, that ripple effect
Yeah.
is incredible and
Yeah.
real.
That's the key, is the ripple effect. And we never know where it's going to happen or where it's going to go. But more times than not, it is in a positive direction and changes people for sure.
Yeah, it,
Definitely.
that's amazing. A lot of connections.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
A lot of
Exactly.
interest.
With what you've been doing, in writing these books that you're coming up with and creating, and obviously drawing on multiple facets of your own life to implement that, as we, as I described in the intro, um, those deceptions, those half truths, so to speak, that help make things a lot more intriguing for your audience. Was there a particular reason why you went in the direction of the suspense as being part of what you started writing about?
Initially, no. So that uh, the first thing that I wrote in my adult life was the screenplay for Phantom Ranch. That's
Okay.
the
Yep.
background. I wrote
Oh,
that. I
cool.
kind of yeah. That's it's one of the graphics that I'm using in the launch event that's coming
All
up.
right.
But the so when I wrote that screenplay, I had no idea what I was doing. I ended up just teaching myself, and I wrote it. I submitted it to several contests, and ended up starting getting some great feedback. Uh, which really kind of helped focus that. And that experience is another traumatic experience. I've learned early on. I'm one of those people that crazy things happen to. If you ask my husband or you ask quite a few of my friends, they will tell you, because they've told enough people already. They're like, if you get the chance to go on a trip with Scott and he's planning it, you have to go, but just know it's not going to go like he said. There's always going to be something that happens. And I found that early on. And, with Phantom Ranch, the reason I wrote that screenplay is because it was such a crazy experience. And once I got through the trauma of it, I'm like, wow, I want to teach people. I want to use this. I want to get the story out because
Yeah.
it's a really twisted, crazy story. But I want to kind of the same thing with Mark by the Ouija. I wanted people um, to understand the power of that and not to mess with it. I haven't
Right.
used it since that book. That I don't advocate use of it, but as a matter of fact, in uh, talking and marketing in it and doing these shows, I've talked to just a staggering amount of people that still want to use the Ouija board,
Yeah.
and even with everything that's been out there. And Hasbro owns the rights to it. And it's still sold, on Target, Amazon, Walmart, all these different places. And the age limit is 8 years and up. 8 years for that, which
Oh,
is,
gee.
yeah, I don't understand it, but there was such a staggering number of people that I talked to that, despite all of this, still wanted to use it. I wanted to make sure, okay, we all have our um, free will.
Yep.
You're an adult. If you want to use it, by all means do it. Just do it safely. And so we ended up putting together this little brochure, I guess you could say. It was a Ouija board safety guide. And it's basically, there's 13 rules. If you do choose to use it, follow these 13 rules. It's never a guarantee that you're going to have a good experience, but these are 13. If you follow these 13 rules, it greatly minimizes your chance of having a bad experience like I did. And I want people to learn from my experience and not have that same experience. And it's the same thing with Phantom Ranch. So that story, I wrote the screenplay, went through that, and then it sat for a couple of years. I didn't really know what to do. So then I decided, all right, let me adapt it to a novel. And so I've been working on that for the last year and a half, and it is coming out this summer. And that story is, you know who Robert Durst is?
I heard the name.
He is a serial killer he was born and raised in New York. His dad started the Durst Corporation, which is still the largest commercial real estate firm in New York City.
Oh, wow.
Just billionaires. And he was a serial killer. I had no idea who he was, but my friends, this married couple, and I decided that, they were going home for Christmas. I wasn't going home for Christmas, so let's go on a hiking trip together, a backpacking trip. And so we did about a 5-day backpacking trip through the Grand Canyon. And in that trip, I ended up meeting this man who was, I found him eccentric. I found him really interesting. He told me his name was Mark. And he told me that he said, "Oh, you're the first person." He was creepy. Let me just state that fact. But I kind of overlooked that because I'm like, oh, he's really interesting to talk to. I didn't feel threatened at that point by him. He told me, he's like, "You're the first person I've seen or talked to in a month." And I'm like, oh, okay. I'm like, well, we've been down here for a month. Then, because I love nature, there are 2 animals that live in the Grand Canyon that's the only place they are. One is California condor, and the other is a certain type of bighorn sheep.
Okay.
And so I said, well, you've been down here for a month. Have you seen a California condor? And this is one of the things that I loved about that conversation. He really got into it. He closed his eyes and he's like, "What you call?" They fly around and then they come. So they live in caves. And he's like, when they come around and they're bringing their baby something to eat, they come and they tip their wings in and they just land inside the cave and then they run to a stop. Well, the California condor is the biggest bird on the planet right now. It has a 10 to 12 foot wingspan and it's 48 inches tall generally. So he's telling me all this. And I'm like, wow, this is fantastic. This is awesome. I mean, so I nicknamed him Condor Mark. And and I'm like, wow, you've seen that? So have you seen this bighorn sheep? Because they're really elusive, and most people that go to the Grand Canyon don't see them. I'm like, I really want to see one in these 5 days. And he's like, yeah. He said, that feeling you get when you're being watched? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, my wife and I were hiking, and I got that feeling, and I looked over my shoulder, and there was this big adult female bighorn sheep. And you gave me free rein at the beginning.
Yep.
I'm going to tell you exactly what he said.
Okay.
This still gives me the creeps, goosebumps. He's like, that feeling you're giving me a watch. And I said, yeah. And he said, well, I turned around and I saw this big adult bighorn sheep, and I'm sitting right next to him, and he just tapped me, tapped me on my arm, and he said, you know what? He said, she had for some reason to hear. And I'm like, okay. And then he said, and you know what? I would have tried to suck him if my wife wasn't there. Exactly what he said. Yes. And clearly, you know, we just met, but you know that I talk a lot. I give a lot of detail. I love, and I was speechless. I mean, what do you say? And I'm just
Exactly.
I'm shocked. And it I don't know how long. I'm sure it was just a few seconds, but when I started to finally wrap my head around it, I'm like, well, wait a second. You just told me that I was the first person that you'd seen or talked to in a month,
Yeah.
but you just mentioned your wife. Where's your wife?
Right.
And he was laughing, because he thought what he said was funny, and it shocked me. And he was like, "You better not talk about my wife. You better not say anything about my wife. And if you do, you're not going to live to regret it."
Oh shit.
I mean, he flipped like that, and I went, "Whoa, calm down." And that started the story of what happened in the Grand Canyon. Um, he eventually, in that 5-day period, tried to kill my friend and I, because he wanted my friend's wife.
Oh geez.
Yeah. And I believe he killed his wife that he referred to.
Yeah.
And I believe, if in fact he did, I believe I know where she's buried. And we obviously got away. I mean, there's a lot more detail that's in the book, and in the movie, but uh, uh, years later, I was telling that story, and just literally right before COVID, I was telling that story at one of my trade shows to a friend of mine, and he's like, "Well, she's going on trial in L.A." This was Saturday. He's like, he's going on trial on Tuesday. I lived in LA at the time. And I'm like, I did not know that. So I went to the trial. I was the only civilian that they allowed in the trial. It was a media circus. I sat the two people down was Gloria Allred. I don't know why she was there, but I was the only person in there, or the only civilian in there, and I sat on the first row, the front row, right behind him. And at one point, he turned around to see who was in the courtroom, and I leaned over to make sure he saw me. And I remember thinking, I'm like, I didn't say anything, but I'm like, in my head, I'm like, "Do you remember me? Because I remember
Yeah.
you."
Yeah.
I don't think he remembered me, but he was, at that one of the days. It was a Friday afternoon. I'm like, I need to tell someone that I think that there's one or two more victims that they don't know about.
Right.
So I told the bailiff, I said, "Look, because the bailiff and I don't think the judge did, but the bailiff and one of the attorneys knew who I was, and they allowed, they're like, "Oh, you let him
Okay.
in,"
Yeah.
because of this experience, because my interaction with him. And so I told the bailiff, I said, "I think that there's, one or two more victims that you guys may not know about." And I said, "I need to tell somebody." And he's like, "Stay right here." He's like, "I'm gonna go get someone for you to talk to." So he left. In about 30 minutes, he came back, and he said, "Everyone's gone for the day. It's Friday afternoon." He's like, "Can you come back on Monday?" So I'm going to be here every day of this trial. And that was Friday afternoon. Pandemic hit.
Oh, gee.
Yeah, trial was shut down. Obviously, for a couple of years, well over a year. It was during that time, we couldn't afford to live in LA anymore, so we ended up
Right.
moving to Texas.
Okay.
And so I never got to tell that bailiff or whoever he was going to have me talk to about this. So years later, I didn't know, how I found out that it was him. Is I was telling the story to a friend of mine who is actually she's a director, and I want her to direct the short film for the marked by the Ouija uh, short film.
Yeah.
And she's like, have you ever heard of Robert Durst? I'm like, no. And so she pulled out her laptop and we were tracking him. We were tracking him, his reaction. So his best friend, Susan Berman, started blackmailing him, because his family had,
Big money.
big money.
Yeah.
And she had a cottage in Beverly Hills that she was struggling to pay for. And she didn't want to lose it. So she told him, I'm going to tell the police where Kathy's body, his first wife, back in it's 1978, I believe. I'm going to tell them where they are unless you give me some money. So he made 2 payments. I believe they were about $50,000 each. And then he decided, oh, she got to go. So he was actually going out to kill her. And there was the manhunt going on for him. It was after he was in Galveston and he killed a man in Galveston. He was hiding out as a deaf mute woman, and he rented a house and kind of like it was almost like a boarding house. He just rented a
Yeah.
room. Came home
Yeah.
from the grocery store one day, and there was his neighbor across the hall was in his room, and he said, "I don't know who you are, but I know you're not a deaf mute woman." And so Morris Black was killed, cut up, put in 5 garbage bags, threw him in Galveston Bay. The next morning, everything popped up except for his head. Never found his head. He got this attorney down by Houston. He was acquitted of the murder, said it was self-defense, and he was acquitted of the mutilation of the body, said it was self-defense, which I don't understand. How can it be
How in the
self-defense?
world?
Yeah,
Yes.
I don't understand. But he was acquitted. Well, at that point, the New York DA was waiting for him because they were still trying to get him. They knew he killed his first wife, but they couldn't prove it. They didn't have a body or a murder weapon or anything. So, but it was all circumstantial. But after he was acquitted, they were going in to get him and bring him back to New York, and he ditched him, and he was going out to kill Susan Berman. And on that trip, he ended up. My friend and I, we tracked him to he disappeared when he got out for a month when he was in Albuquerque.
Okay.
And Albuquerque's right next to the Grand Canyon. It was the same time I was in the Grand Canyon. And the man that told me said, "Oh, you're the first person I've talked to in a month." I mean, it all started making sense. But what was the kicker was I remember Condor Moore kept blinking. And when I was at trial, because it's still at that point, I'm like, I don't want to accuse somebody of murder
Right.
or trying to kill me or attempted murder, even if he's on trial for murder. I'm not, but I noticed that he kept blinking, and I remembered Condor Mark kept blinking, and I started doing a lot of research, and he, with all his money, he ended up going to Japan and getting these special contacts put in that made his eyes blink. He also had pecs. Excuse me. He had pecs put in. I mean, he had plastic surgery basically just to change his body basically. And but so that's what did it. I'm like, this is who it is. So that's what Phantom Ranch is about. And the screenplay, and then the book that I've adapted, and that book is coming out this summer. And I've already had I'm in the editing process now, and I've already had some ARC readers read it, and it's the comments that I've got back are like, "Wow, this is intense. This is suspenseful." And going back to your question about why I'm drawn to suspense and thrillers and paranormal and horror. I think originally when I wrote Mark by the Ouija, it was just to scare people, but and I wanted to tell that story because it's such a crazy, twisted story.
Yeah.
But throughout that process, it changed, and that's where that safe space come in. And I'm like, all right, that's more important than So I really kind of leaned into that. Well, with Phantom Ranch, I similar journey, I guess you could say. It's just another crazy, twisted, true story. But I want, and it deals with I love nature. I love backpacking, camping, the Grand Canyon. I mean, it's just a magical space. So I wanted people to. It's important that I want people to learn from my mistakes, and to understand that everything is not always as it appears.
Right.
Uh, and that I went through my life believe for so long believing that that I didn't matter, that I was a horrible person, that it was all focused on me, and it was all what people were telling me, what I was being told, and so it was all surface. I didn't look beyond that to see what was causing that. Um,
Right.
Years later, I look back and some of those people that were telling me it was horrible came out gay later on. So it's important to me to really emphasize the point that, and that's what I try to do in these first two books, and what I'm going to do in these projects that are coming up afterward is I want people to not just take it for face value. Look what the cause is, look what the root is, look what the meaning of it is, and then make your decision when you have uh, all of the details. When I've always said that when I'm in nature, it's not the animals that scare me, it's the people. you know and this is that was part of the reason that I wanted to really share the stories, because this man was a very unassuming man, and I saw a side of him that has never been reported. He's had a movie, a couple, the Jinx documentary. He's had thousands and thousands of magazines, news articles, news reports, books written about him, but not one of them shares or talks about the side of him that I experienced. So I'm like, I want to get this out, because even though I do believe that there's evil out there, and even though I don't think you could not be evil and still end up killing multiple people, but there are still, to understand the past, you have to understand, or to understand the future, you have to understand the past. So, you know, I want people to see the warning signs that I saw and I didn't pick up. And
Right.
so in their lives, they can be more aware of the warning signs in their life. And hopefully they won't have to go through some of the same experiences that I went through. At least that's what I tell myself. I hope that people learn from, my experiences and my mistakes. But and then the next project after that, of course, I've got them all lined up, because that creative,
Yeah.
that wheel just keeps turning. I'm like, and I love it. I'm passionate about it, and I love that it's really resonating with people. And it's, I hope, I can only hope that um, that Phantom Ranch has a lot of the same effect with people that Mark by the Ouija did, that it helps them. I added in my coming out story because I wanted people to understand, especially today, uh,
Yeah.
in the perception of the LGBTQ community, there's still a lot of people that believe that uh, if you're gay, you're feminine. You don't like camping.
Right. Right.
So I wanted to address that with that. I wanted the book to be universally uh, enjoyed by everyone, but the underlying message is, for the people that don't really understand the LGBT community. Hey, look, there are uh, men and women out there that like camping and backpacking.
Right.
Being gay doesn't mean that you're feminine or mean that you're a drag queen or anything.
Right. Right.
It's just one small part of you. So I wanted to address that. And then I talked about my coming out experience in the book, from from my character. And I wanted, I put some extra, information in there, true information about how my parents handled it, because there's a lot of parents that still struggle with uh, their kids being
Right.
gay. And
Yeah.
I think that the way my parents handle it, I think so many other people can it'll resonate with so many people, and maybe it'll help them work through their journey of coming to acceptance about their child. And
Yeah.
then there's also, again, my coming out story. I mean, the book's not a gay book at all. It's about my experience, but I put that in there because I wanted to, the third aspect is I wanted the people um, that are gay, that were in my situation, that have been told, hey, look, you're bad, you're wrong.
Right.
If you're gay, it means you're a drag queen. Well, I'm not. You know, I love drag
Right.
queens. I love their shows. I highly I, I watch RuPaul's Drag Race, and I'm amazed at their creativity. I respect
Right.
all creativity.
Yeah.
So I wanted those people that are struggling with coming out to, you know, like, well, hey, how can I be gay if I like backpacking, or how can I be gay if I like to fish or camp or hunt, you know, or you know, I wanted them to know, hey, you can be gay, doesn't, and you can still do that, you know. And
Yeah.
I wanted to, you know, give them an example. So this book, this story, this experience is what started it all. And you know, I'm excited to finish editing it. I'm excited for the book to come out, and I'm excited for the movie. We already have two actors and a director set up for the movie. Did you ever watch Mean Girls with Lindsay Lohan?
I've never watched it fully. I've watched clips of it, but I know what you're talking about.
So the guy that was her love interest, he sat in front of her in school. It's a great
Okay.
movie. It's classic. The guy that sat in front of her in math class, his name is Jonathan Bennett, and he's huge right now. He's one of the producers at Hallmark Channel. He's a host. He's big. So he's actually committed to play me in the movie, and I'm really excited. And then my publicist, one of her good friends, uh, Bridgetta, one of Bridgetta's good friends, is also, he was the connection to Jonathan Bennett, and he's also going to be in the movie. So we're
Oh,
hoping that both of them come for the book launch event it'll be late May, early June for that. So, but I'm really excited for that to come out, because you know, uh, again, I believe that you can make change, you can help people by not being direct, by entertaining them, and in the course of them being entertained, they learn something about life, about themselves, about, you know, and then they can take that and use it in their life however they see fit. And
right.
that's, I really believe that. And that's really what at the core of, you know, I wouldn't be who I am today if it weren't for other people and their influences on my life. Rosa Parks, Miss Sanderson, my brother, you know, my
Yeah.
family, you know, my husband, all these different people. And if I can return the favor and pay it forward, then my life will be. I'll consider my life successful and worthwhile. You
Yeah.
know, and it
For
sounds like you're the same way. I mean, you're making change, and you're doing it in a very you know, creative, conversational way, where it's not aggressive, it's not assuming, but it's thought provoking, and
yeah.
it really makes you dig deep with yourself and come to terms with, hey, you know, what am I not honest with myself, and why aren't I honest, and what do I need to do to change that? Because once you do that, your life is going to be better.
For sure. For sure. I wanted to share one thing here, Scott, just to piggyback off of the way that you described what the purpose of why you included that part of your story in there, for others who might be struggling with their own sexuality to understand a perspective. For me, in my life, I'm as straight as a broomstick, but I love fashion. Love it. Love it. I've produced fashion shows, put fashion shows on, hired models, worked with photographers, all of that type of stuff. Been around gay people plenty of times, have friends that are gay. Went to college at a Christian college with friends who, at that moment in time, I knew were gay, but they hadn't come to that conclusion of their own self, right? But I knew it then. I was like, yeah, just is what it is. Not everything that we see and think is the case is always the case. You have to have a conversation to be able to understand that not everything is as it seems to be, right?
Exactly right. Yes.
And that's part of the problem in the world today is nobody's willing to have conversations. And that's the key basis of fear, really, is fear is based off of something you don't understand or know. Just like when I was a little kid and I would see spirits, didn't know what it was, couldn't understand it. Now that I'm older, I've had these experiences that help me understand it, and I'm not afraid of it any longer. It just happens. I know what it is, right? And for me, it's always been that scenario. And even from the parents' perspective, right? Because you brought that and said you'd explain it more in this story. I remember one time my dad was frustrated with some of the things that I was doing in the fashion industry, doing shows, putting on fashion shows, and I was losing money doing it. And he said to me one time, he said, "All this fashion crap that you're doing is just a bunch of garbage." And I looked at him and I said, "You have no idea what I'm doing. So how can you even make that statement?" Now, my dad was a mechanic when I was growing up. So he was kind of that man's man sort of vibe, working on cars, wrenching, all that kind of stuff. Eventually had to move out of that industry, but he went into auto parts. Same scenario, being around something that he knew how to do and figured out. But that perception, it goes back to what I was talking about early on of the incarnation component of our souls. I feel that we come into a lifetime of being something where we are supposed to help others learn a lesson as well as our own selves. And whether we come in as straight or gay or fluid or whatever, it's all for the purpose of our own understanding and growth of our soul. So I just wanted to share that to piggyback off of what you were saying, to give another side of that perspective where I'm straight, I'm not gay at all, but I love fashion. I love visual imagery. I love dressing people up. I went into the jewelry industry because I love jewelry. I like the shiny, bobbly, creative components of that, right? One of my favorite icons of this latter century, um, who didn't even attain a level of stardom until she was in her 90s, is Iris Apfel. I don't know if you've ever heard of Iris Apfel or not, but
I don't know who she is, but I've heard of her.
but she dressed outrageously, Scott, because that's who she was. And that's what made her iconic in today's culture's eyes when somebody put out a story about her and everybody just bombarded her and put her on this huge pedestal. And it wasn't until she was in her 90s that she got that recognition. And it's like that lady lived her life to the fullest expression of what she could be because that's who she was. And she wanted to do that. And I think that's a perfect example for others, even as well as your story of just being yourself and then using your experiences to tell your story and help others to move on further. One of the things we touched on it real early in the beginning, but I want to come back and really take a moment to uh, give the audience some perspective on it, is how nature helps with mental clarity, introspection, and healing. And if you could just speak to that a little bit so the audience can get a better understanding of what we've talked about in terms of nature and the connectivity with nature.
Thank you. I love that. So most people believe, I mentioned earlier that, going camping or being in nature And you don't have to go to the mountains.
No.
And nature is everywhere. You can go to the arboretum, but as long as you really truly understand it, and you take the time, you open your heart, you open your soul, your mind to it. So most people believe that it's just a way to disconnect, which it is, which is extremely helpful. But from my experience, the endorphins that are produced when you are in nature, and there are a lot of factors that can bring that, can enhance those endorphins. Those endorphins can help so many different aspects. It can help depression.
Yeah.
It can build confidence. It can help you make better decisions. It helps you, uh, what we are talking about, take a step back and not rush to judgment. Not, you take a step back and just see, kind of get all the information before you make a decision. And that's how you make better decisions. That changes lives. That is what I believe, and that's what Explore Life Outside, my YouTube channel, was
Yeah.
all about. Is to, and I believe that there's a lot of people that have an interest in nature, but they're scared of the unknown. They don't know what to expect, and they don't know what gear or how to really prepare for that. And so, I wanted to. I have over 100 videos posted. I wanted to do some of the more basic, you know, uh, uh, aspects of it. Like, when you go to a campground, you get the or oh my gosh, my mind just went like you're not your registration card, but you get the card, you fill it out, and your permit, and you
Yeah.
put it there. It's just simple little things like that. Because my thought is, again, this is it's a common thread in our conversation, is
Yeah.
the more the more information that you have, the less you're afraid of it. And if I can give people that experience, or that information, and have them go out and try it, then they can experience the benefits. And and then, the more experiences, like what you're talking about with creativity, the more
Yeah.
experience you have with it, the more confident you get with it. And then they start to share it with someone else. And again, that ripple effect comes in. But there's the mental clarity, I have to say, and the effect of your soul are two of the biggest benefits. And that mental clarity side of nature is is just, it's so monumental. I can't even wrap my head around it. I'm
Yeah.
55, and I've been camping and backpacking and hiking my whole entire life, and I'm still learning things and experiencing things about nature that I didn't understand and know. And I just want more people to feel that. I've never been in nature and not felt connected. I've
Yeah.
never been in nature and felt I didn't matter. If anyone feels that way, go and spend some time in nature, and have that connection yourself. Build that, and you'll come back from that recharged, energized, a better sense of self. I believe the more experiences you have, you'll start to believe in yourself, and you'll start trusting your soul. You'll start
Yeah.
understanding, I matter, I'm important. And I believe that the more people that feel that, then the more understanding we'll have. The more, what you were mentioned earlier, they'll not be so quick to judge.
Right.
They'll look at everything. And again, that's the common thread in all my books, is don't judge a book by the cover. Don't uh, uh, base your decisions on the surface information. Dig deep. Just like what you were talking about, the fashion industry and the LGBT community. Don't judge people just by who they are. And it's the
Right.
same way with nature. I mean, to that really helps. I 100% believe people to do that. And and again, for me, one of the ways it's the magic of thinking big, that book, but also nature. If I feel like my life was spiraling, or I feel like, I feel like I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just
Yeah.
running around in circles, and I'm just, what do they call it? A rat chasing a mouse chasing the cheese,
Yeah.
and I feel like I question myself. Is what I'm doing even, does it even matter? Is it, go
Oh,
and spend some time in nature and you'll come back with those answers. And it's different for everyone. But,
yeah.
that's it's so and then there's the physical side of it. There's the exercise. It's good for your lungs, it's good for your mind, it's good for your brain, it's good for it's your mind, it's good for everything. I mean, I can't say enough about the benefits. And
Yeah.
you've had experiences, and you value nature, and it's not just the mountains. I mean, they're stunning, and again, it's not, you don't have to be in the mountains. You could be the arboretum. You can go to, there's some wildlife preserves,
Yeah.
all around the country. I mean, they're, unfortunately, they're disappearing, but
Right.
or there's national parks and state parks. You don't have to start, if you've never been, you don't have to go all or nothing. Start little, and the more you build up your confidence, and pay attention. I encourage everyone to pay attention to how they're feeling, how it's, because that's going to be the true, uh, the, that's what's going to make, when they see the change in themselves,
Yeah.
then they're like, oh, this is really helpful and beneficial. I do feel better. I don't feel alone. I don't feel invisible. I feel that I do matter, and I have the confidence, and I have, just, it's amazing, the decisions, that start making better decisions, and you have more patience and more understanding, and it's outstanding.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Even from that perspective too, if you don't live close to a park or a nature center or any of that type of stuff, you can just go out in your backyard.
Yeah.
Take your shoes off, take your socks off, let your feet touch the grass. And I guarantee you, if you give yourself at least 5 to 10 minutes, if you're super stressed out, angry, whatever, do that process. Just go out in your backyard or your front yard, whichever is easiest. Take your shoes and socks off, connect to that earth. Within 5 to 10 minutes, you're going to notice a shift in those emotions. And don't just take my word for it. If you need to, there's a documentary on YouTube. It's called Grounding. It's all about that whole process of connecting to the earth. And it will literally change your life. May not change it completely, but it'll change it for that instance.
It will improve it 100%.
Yeah.
I
Yes.
I have a client. She's on my trade show, for my trade show business. I've got amazing clients. They're incredible, and I love them all. But this one is, she's, and a lot of them have actually turned into personal friends now. Just because they're just incredible. And I have one that, um, she told me 2 years ago. She said, and she's the global marketing director for her company. And, obviously a very stressful job. She did a lot of traveling. She's balancing a family and work. And she told me 2 years ago exactly what you said. She said, one of my favorite things to do. And she's like, I do it every time when I come home from the show because it's so stressful. I take my shoes off and I'll just stand in my yard. I will let the grass touch my feet. And I've, I love nature, obviously, but I came home from that show and I like, what? I'm gonna I'm gonna do that, and I did it. The backyard, and the dogs are running around, and I was just stressful, and I didn't feel like, "Ah, you haven't got the time for this. Come on, you've got so many things to do." And
Oh,
my
right.
to do
Exactly.
list is like 2 pages, and I'm anal retentive when it comes to my to do list. But I gotta say, that was another side of nature that I had an experience. You know, again, I'm still learning. So I did that. And I came back in after it was probably only about 5 minutes. After I did that, I came back in and I got more done on my to-do list than I expected to do that day. And it's because I decompressed for just 5 minutes. I started making better decisions. I mean, that was an immediate uh,
Yeah,
result of taking my shoes off and just standing in my yard, and
exactly.
I played with the dogs, a little bit. And I came back in and like all that anxiety that I was feeling, God, you know, it's incredible.
Yeah,
It's
for
incredible.
sure. For sure. One of the things that I always want to remind the audience at the end of each one of these episodes is to listen to your heart, but always be kind to your mind.
Love that. I love that.